In April of this year, the premiere of the film Civil War by British director Alex Garland took place, which tells about a hypothetical armed confrontation within the United States. And if in the world the film was treated as a fantastic political dystopian thriller about what could happen, in the United States it provoked a great wave of controversy. The film was even accused of prognostically programming a real armed confrontation in this country. There is a popular conspiracy theory that certain powerful behind-the-scenes forces are tuning people in this way to certain events. However, the film, no matter how skillfully made, cannot act as a catalyst for significant events. Cinema is rather a distorted mirror, in which the current fears, experiences, and aspirations of the audience are often reflected. The authors of Civil War managed to touch a very sensitive chord. Today, American society looks more divided and even radicalized than ever before, primarily because of the upcoming US presidential election. But there are also other factors that create tension among Americans. Can the current political turbulence escalate into full-scale armed confrontation? Is the US threatened with a split? Ultimately, what parallels can be drawn between the present and the events of the American Civil War in the mid-19th century? We will discuss this in this video. Before the most interesting part, please subscribe to my channel and like this video. Thank you. Regarding the American Civil War of 1861-1865, stereotypical and erroneous notions have taken root that it all started because of the issue of slavery. Allegedly, in Washington, they wanted to abolish this institution as shameful and hindering the development of the country. Instead, Southern planters wanted so badly to preserve the old order that they decided to separate. Politicians on both sides failed to reach an agreement, and instead the rifles and cannons started talking. But this is an oversimplified view of things. The Emancipation Proclamation itself was not signed until January 1st, 1863. By that time, the war had been going on for almost 2 years, and the final abolition of slavery was included in the U.S. Constitution only after its completion in 1865. Also, the slave system did not prevent the states of Delaware, Kentucky, and Missouri from fighting on the side of the North. A significant role in the start of the war was played by serious political and ideological polarization between the two parts of the country. However, it was caused not only by the issue of slavery. Citizens of the northern and southern states had very different views on what the state system should be. Northerners traditionally favored a strong, centralized government and strengthening the integrity of the country. Southerners, on the other hand, regarded the United States as a union of independent states united by common ideals. Interestingly, the latter approach has survived and still has a significant following. The differences between the southern and northern states also remain very strong. A 2022 poll conducted by YouGov and The Economist paints a rather bleak picture. 54% of Republican respondents believe that a new American Civil War in the next decade is very likely. Among Democrats, 40% of those surveyed share this position. Also, 23%, or 1 in 4 Americans, would support their state's decision to declare independence. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene of the Republican Party in February of this year even called for a national divorce. She called for separating the red, mostly Republican states from the blue, mostly Democratic ones, and significantly reducing federal government spending. Differences in foreign policy issues are also deepening. For example, 70% of Republicans believe that aid to Ukraine was not worth the cost, and almost the same percentage of Democrats hold the opposite view. When it comes to the war in the Gaza Strip, 60% of Democratic supporters believe that Israel is going too far, compared to only 8% of Republicans. The ratings of both presidential candidates fluctuate constantly, but it can already be said that the lion's share of Biden's voters is from states that were part of the North during the Civil War, while Trump has the majority from the former Confederate States of America. Most likely, after the completion of the elections, the crisis will not subside, but only flare up stronger due to the disagreement of some voters with the election results. The high level of polarization is also indicated by the influence of politics on the personal lives of U.S. citizens. A Wakefield research study showed that 11% of couples broke up due to political differences. Moreover, young people turned out to be the most politicized. Among millennials, this figure reached 22%. The work of Yale political science professor Eitan Hirsch showed that only 30% of American couples are formed by people who support different political parties. The rest prefer to build relationships with people who have the same political views. So can we say that an insurmountable political divide has arisen between Americans, and one wrong step will lead to an outbreak of violence? Not exactly. Analysts at the Carnegie Endowment published an interesting study last year on the ideological differences between Americans. According to its authors, the differences are not as deep as they seem, but they cannot be called completely contrived either. There is even a certain consensus on such hotly debated issues as abortion rights, gun proliferation, and views on American history. Thus, the majority of Democrats and 4 out of 10 Republicans support the creation of a federal database to track gun sales to the public, as well as a ban on the sale of high-capacity magazines. Approximately the same number of Republicans are in favor of banning the free sale of assault rifles. But at the same time, only 18% of Republicans consider gun violence to be a serious problem, while among Democrats this figure reaches 73%. Or, for example, the issue of illegal migration on the southern border. Biden's policy here is criticized not only by Republicans, but also by 30% of Democrats and 71% of independent voters. The majority of followers of both parties hold misconceptions about the political agenda of their opponents. The biggest gap in perception is between the most progressive activists on the left wing and the ultra-conservatives on the right. So, an ironic situation arises. The more actively people participate in political life, the more incorrect views on the beliefs of the opposite side they have, or at least pretend to. Analysts also highlight the so-called emotional polarization. That is, political opponents are disliked not because of their political program or any objective factors, but simply because they are from the other camp. This trend began to gain momentum with the spread of talk shows and news on cable channels. They actively replicated misconceptions not only about political views, but also about their demographic composition. Thus, the stereotype that Republicans are old, wealthy, white evangelicals, and Democrats are young representatives of various minorities took deep root. In reality, however, the median demographic indicators of both parties are quite similar. Research has also shown that emotional polarization is not insurmountable. As part of experiments, researchers organize gatherings or dinners with moderated discussions between supporters of different parties. Polls after their completion showed that the participants began to better understand their opponents and generally treat them better. Interestingly, Alex Garland's film also appeals to the deep-rooted fear of many Americans of the high level of public armament, which is a consequence of very liberal legislation on this issue. There is a widespread belief that this makes potential outbreaks of violence not only more likely, but also more destructive. This is especially true for states with poorer economic conditions or destabilizing social factors such as illegal migration. Moreover, this fear can hardly be called irrational, and it's not just about school shootings and not only that. As of 2022, there were 200 registered militia groups in the United States, paramilitary formations like the Boogaloo Boys. It is problematic to establish the exact number of their members, but the figure varies around 20,000 people, about the seating capacity of Madison Square Garden. From time to time, the militiamen hold conventions where they conduct training in shooting, tactics, or survival in the wilderness. And this could be considered not the worst option for a club for middle-aged men, if not for the openly destructive internal agenda of the militiamen. For the most part, they consider the federal government to be their main enemy. Allegedly, it only dreams of abolishing the Second Amendment to the Constitution, which does not allow them to finally destroy the freedoms of Americans and enslave them. The militiamen are very fond of various conspiracy theories, such as the existence of a secret plan to replace the white Christian population of the United States with migrants from Latin America and the Middle East. There were even attempts to stop this by destroying the U.S. electrical infrastructure. Also, some separate militia groups really enjoy reading Mein Kampf and other far-right theories in their spare time. Finally, some paramilitary groups directly declare that they are preparing for a new civil war and would not mind starting it. And these are not just armed amateurs who have watched too many action movies and read dubious literature. Among the militiamen, There are many people who have served in the army and even had experience in hotspots like Iraq or Afghanistan, and they have already resorted to violence against their opponents from among the far left and the police. The militiamen are also accused of sabotaging the electrical infrastructure. In December 2022, unknown persons shot transformers in the state of North Carolina with sniper rifles, resulting in about 40,000 people being left without electricity for several days in sub-zero temperatures. A total of 26 attacks on the electrical infrastructure were recorded that year. In a word, the combination of belief in various conspiracy delusions together with the availability of weapons and skills in using them creates an extremely explosive mixture. Any crisis or weakening of law enforcement structures creates an extremely favorable environment for organizations like the Boogaloo Boys, which can set the wheel of violence in motion or even seize power in certain regions. In fact, during the Civil War of 1861-1865, the first to open fire were members of similar irregular military formations. However, a key difference between the current situation and the middle of the 19th century was that at that time, the United States was predominantly a peripheral state that was of little interest to anyone outside its borders. Now they have uncompromising rivals interested in chaos and clashes on its territory. For example, the Russian Federation provided bases for training the base, an ultra-right terrorist group that aims to set apart the predominantly white northwestern states into a separate state. Its leader, Ronaldo Nazzaro, was allegedly long ago recruited by the FSB and is now hiding from American justice in St. Petersburg. The Russian Federation has also been supporting various separatist movements such as Texexit or Calexit for more than a year now. For now, they are mostly marginal, but this could well change against the backdrop of growing disappointment in the ability of the central government to solve problems. You can get an approximate visualization of this war in the movie Civil War, which we mentioned earlier. But if you don't have time to watch the entire movie, then I found a better video on YouTube where you can briefly watch an analysis of this film and learn about the main political messages that are hidden in it. You can find the link to the video in the description below. In summary, the United States is indeed currently going through the biggest political and social crisis in modern history. The crisis has been fueled by many factors, from the political elites playing along with radicals from both sides of the political spectrum to the factor of the development of social networks that allow the production of destructive and conspiracy theories. Will this lead to a new, large-scale clash? It's hard to say. Here, everything will depend on the ability of Americans to hear each other and understand that what unites them is much greater than what divides them. After all, the success of a system is characterized not by the absence of crises, but by the ability to respond to them. Thanks for watching, and peace to you.